back in the chair. Mr. Fugate, the nation's capital barely escaped Sandy. We were very grateful, just like we escaped the snowfall this time. But we know from all the scientists tell us that we are headed for major disasters. They tell us that there's no longer debate about whether there is climate change, but about how to manage climate change. And so I'm interested in issues, and I will be talking to the next panel about pre-disaster mitigation. The member was asking about Florida. I noticed that they're building right in the ocean virtually, but trying to do some pre-disaster mitigation as they do. FEMA has been helpful in what we've been trying to do with the so-called 17th Street levee. Without that levee, the Washington Monument and indeed the entire monumental core would be exposed to horrific flooding, rebuilding downtown Washington in the monumental core. And those steps have been taken. I certainly hope, since those steps were taken and that levee was done before the final word was in on climate change, I would be interested in your view as whether or not you think that levee could forestall a seriously Sandy-like storm. But I'm also, because it's taken so long, interested in the drawing of the flood maps. As I understand, and this is what gives government a bad name, the drawing of the flood maps, I'm sorry, the work of the Army Corps of Engineers for certification is done separately from FEMA or from other agencies. Why can't that work be done concurrently so that they look to see that the levee is constructed properly and they get on with the next step, rather than in some sequential fashion which assures it will be delayed?
As far as that, I will take that back to staff. I know we've been going round and round trying to get this thing built and get those maps updated. Part of what you gave us with the Sandy Recovery Improvement Act was at least things like the environmental and historical reviews, which each agencies used to do independently, we now do concurrently. So we are taking some small steps to try to look at these projects. And the President's given some pretty good direction on this. He said, you know, when we're doing some of these capital improvements, we shouldn't be spending years doing the studies. We should do our studies together. We're not going to change the requirements, but it doesn't mean we should do each study and wait for the next study. So we are moving that direction, but not as fast as we should. As far as the protection for the future, none of these designs are the 100% solution to future risk. What they are really designed are risk in the 1% or more. And I think you just identified one of our challenges. We've always looked at mitigating back to a 1% or less risk. Unfortunately, we saw this in Sandy. Some of the mitigation work done after Hurricane Irene was done to that standard, and Sandy went over it, and we lost the structure anyway. So we're asking a different question. Maybe 1% makes sense for a lot of things, but for critical infrastructure like hospitals, fire stations, maybe we should build to a higher standard. We're currently working with an interagency on the Federal side to look at, should we come up with a more stringent standard, not just building 1 foot above our base flood elevation, which is the 1% risk, perhaps even building higher, not because we have data to drive that per se, but because of the uncertainty of the future data and these investments of literally tens to hundreds to billions of dollars of our future, making sure we're building to that future with that uncertainty.
I very much appreciate what you're saying. The monumental core is irreplaceable. I wonder if, and I'd ask you to look into this, whether or not one could realize this would mean further delay, whether you could look into the 17th Street levee and see whether it should be altered now, right in the beginning, to make sure that it meets the standard you have just indicated may be necessary. Could I ask one more question in light of a recent tragedy that occurred here, and that was the WMATA tragedy where we lost human life, and more than 80 people went to the hospital. It was sadly reported, at least initially, it looks like coordination in terms of communication, underground and above ground, and even underground was lacking. Now, this is, 13 years after 9/11, and of course, FEMA is there for natural as well as terrorist disasters. Is FEMA considered this apparent failure, what it could mean, not only in a real natural disaster, but heaven forbid in a terrorist disaster? Are you involved in this disaster and helping WMATA and the various agencies, city and federal involved, to right this situation so that we assure, particularly underground, there is the kind of communication that could enable rescue to occur?
Yes, ma'am. Looking at this, first of all, I have a personal equity in this. That's the subway that I ride home on. I was not in town. It went a little bit earlier than I normally depart, but I am on that train Monday through Friday, both coming in and going home. I know that very spot in the tunnel. I can tell you, anytime a train stops in a tunnel now, people start looking around. Where before, it was just kind of like the normal pause, people are now looking around going, why are we stopped? Our National Capital Region office does work with all those entities. I would ask that we need to wait till we get more from the investigations to find out what did happen, but we will pledge our support through our National Capital Region, both to the district and to Metro, for any assistance they require from us, both from planning, training, and exercising, to be better prepared for future incidents.
Thank you. They are currently, the National Capital Region office is currently involved with this investigation and with this work.
We're not involved in the investigation, but we are there to support all the parties if they request us. And I think what will happen when we do get some of the details and look at some of the recommendations of what to do better, we would be in a position to support both the district and Metro if they request our assistance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Norton. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Fugate, thank you very much.